Greetings everyone, and welcome to the AI World Summit 2020, organized by MyFinB Group. We'd like to thank you for attending this session today entitled AI for Sustainability, the Role of AI in Achieving Sustainable Development Goals (SDG). The main context for this session is, while most businesses include SDGs in their corporate reporting, many find that it is a laborious and time-consuming process to convert stakeholder aspirations into corporate actions. As many struggle to reconcile value creation with SDG reporting, a third variable surfaces: how can we utilize the potential of AI to achieve value-based reporting? How do we analyze tons of qualitative, non-financial information to show we created impact for our stakeholders? This track reveals how AI applications can play a useful role to help not just in reporting functions, but how to identify opportunities and avert risks towards achieving the different SDGs. We are deeply honored today to have our panel of speakers from Israel, USA, Malaysia, Hong Kong and Sri Lanka. Moderated by Ilkari Demirdag, President of ESG for Emerging Markets Economic Development Commission of World Business Angel Investment Forum, and Head of Investor Relations of Energisa Energy. Our esteemed panelists comprise of Karen Bernstein-Pinto, Chief Strategy Officer of Sergi Box, Technical Consultant of Google for Startups SDG Accelerator; Roberto Benatello, Executive Director of Business Council for Sustainable Development Malaysia; Kelvin Ung, Strategy Management Consultant Post-Acquisition Integration, Greenfield Innovation, Compliance of Strategic Intelligence Consulting Limited; Tan Po Ling, Director of AIWS Malaysia, Sendirian Berhad; Samra Kazmi, Founder and CEO of Women in Sustainable Innovation, Managing Director of Innovation Strategist, RESRG; Vijith Kanangara, Chairman of Smart Media The Annual Report Company, AFNO Asia Pacific a PVE Limited, and Kandi Advertising a PVE Limited. Without much further ado, I leave the digital stage to the chairperson and moderator of this track to continue the session. Over to you, Ilkari Demirdag, and enjoy this wonderful session. Thank you.
Hi, before we start the session, may we request for all the panelists to turn on your video screen, please? Thank you.
Well, I cannot because I'm on, the host has stopped me.
Okay, we will sort that out.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can't
Okay.
see video on either.
Can't either, yes.
Good morning, all. To me, good morning. Please let us know when we can start.
You may start now. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Ilkay Demirdag, and I'm going to be the moderator of this panel, together with esteemed panelists. I'm based in Turkey, and it's 5:45 a.m. in the morning here. So I'm very, very excited about this panel because we have two buzzwords coming in together, and we have really insightful discussions to elaborate on it. The subject of our panel is the role of AI in achieving sustainable development goals. And today we actually designed our panel in two parts. The first part will be on the use of AI for achieving value-based reporting. And the second part will be focusing on the use of AI and digital technologies for creating sustainable solutions. And in the end, we would like to have 20 minutes for Q&A section. So let me first start with our first part, as I said, on the use of AI for achieving value-based reporting. To really elaborate on the subject, basically we have no choice. AI is about to transform our lives, and what we can decide right now is how to use it to win trust and change our world for the better. AI for good is reducing risks to the enterprise, its employees, and its customers. It's making governments more transparent and efficient, healthcare more effective and accessible, cities more livable, and the planet we share more sustainable. But the success of all that relies on quality data, which we would like to elaborate on the first part with our panelists, Samra Kazmi, Vijit Kanangra, and Tan Mandling. So to start with, I would like to leave the floor to Samra Kazmi, who is the Chief Innovation Strategist of RES-RG, a corporate innovation risk advisory. She's also the founder of Women in Sustainable Innovation, a global community of women advocating for sustainability in innovation ecosystem. She's an award-winning risk executive, a top-level RegTech influencer, and recipient of New York City's Inspiring FinTech Female Award. As a futurist, she is also an advisor to the Harvard Business Review and member of Entrepreneurship Magazine Leadership Network. Samra has spent 2.5 decades in leadership roles on Wall Street and FinTech, helping organizations effectively manage the risks arising from the change and disruption through innovation. Samra today will be presenting on using AI for creating reliable data for comprehensive analysis. So I leave the floor to Samra.
Thank you, okay. And again, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everybody, wherever you're joining us from. I'm based out of New York. And basically what I wanted to talk to you about are the challenges that we face today when it comes to collecting data or even using the insights derived from data in order to inform policy making or program development. Because to achieve the SDGs and to ensure no one is left behind, everyone in the world must be represented through high quality data, which should be relevant, timely, reliable, and internationally comparable, that can be used to measure progress, make decisions to improve people's lives. And the world is currently not on track to meeting a majority of the 38 SDG targets. Less than 50% of SDG indicators have sufficient data for proper global monitoring. That is the tier 1 indicators. And the main reasons are that 4 times more indicators have been established than in the Millennium Development Goals era. Many of them are completely new or produced outside of national statistical systems. There is something called data mashing, which is basically data is stored in silos and not really combined in order to derive meaningful insights and do meaningful analysis. There's also a lack of standardization in terms of formats and taxonomy across the globe, across all the different jurisdictions. And there's limited disaggregation of data. Everything is lumped into one big thing. And organizations, governments, not-for-profits, NGOs are not openly sharing their data in order to derive meaningful insights. And of course, as mentioned, this makes it difficult to make progress at scale, given the poor information sharing challenges, etc. So the fact of the matter is that too much of the data that is being used today for reporting is either out of date and too many people are missing. For instance, there are refugees in the world who are not being incorporated in this data, or very expensive surveys are being conducted and their results are not being utilized until it is very late, until like a year or two later, than a year or two after the survey was collected. And of course, that makes it stale information, and any policy that is informed by that data is really either meaningless or falls short in making a difference in people's lives. So there is an urgent need for more accurate, more timely, and more comprehensive data to make the SDGs an actionable framework that can drive these policies in real time for everyone. And how is this being solved? This is a huge problem. This is a huge undertaking. And of course, it's a disparate cohort or a disparate group of nations that we're dealing with and organizations that we're dealing with. There is nothing really that is centralized. So basically, what is being done right now is the use of new technologies, for instance, AI and IoT, in order to collect this data, in order to collect large amounts of data, which you would know as big data, in order to actually derive these meaningful insights. And how is that being done? Basically, there are a few initiatives. One is called Data Shift, where citizens generate their own data, and they actually report this data to some centralized database within their jurisdiction. Then there's something called Data for Now. That is a partnership between the United Nations, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and the World Bank, and a few others, which is also basically looking into using robust methods and AI and IoT and sensors, which are basically IoT. So the other way that is crowdsourcing. So a lot of the people actually in a village or in a certain jurisdiction will actually collect data and then collect it and then combine it and then offer it either to, there will be government agencies or not-for-profits that will take this data and then use it through AI, collect it through various emerging technologies, and then use it as a larger data set to derive meaningful insights. And then the other thing is IoT, where sensors are actually placed on either individuals or on various areas, for instance, geographic locations, in order to monitor flooding or in order to monitor drought. Also, things like using for instance, there are thermometers monitoring if a population, for instance, is getting, there's a high instance of fever, and then seeing whether there is some kind of localized pandemic that is coming up. So basically, this is how the machine-to-machine type of data is being collected. And all of this data is being used to augment the data that is already being collected by the governments, by the NGOs, and by other organizations. Of course, there's a lot more work to be done, and there's this digital divide that we see because certain countries and certain populations within those countries have more access to or stronger access to technology and Wi-Fi, and they're able to use these technologies in order to collect this data and provide this data, while there are others that don't have access to this technology, or they do not have access to strong Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi at all. So we, again, even though there might be an ability to collect this data, there is also there are also hindrances once you've collected them, or there are no capabilities within a certain population. But once we have this data, large data sets through the use of machine learning can be trained into detecting patterns and trends, and based on that, policy can be informed and developed. Again, you know, it can be very granular micro-segmentation that can be derived through AI, and very localized solutions can be provided just because we have this very large data set, but it can be also micro-segmented to very localized populations, and also deriving the same insights from those localized populations to other parts of the world. So that's one area where I think, so there are actually several opportunities that can come up by using this type of, by using these emerging technologies, including the IoT part of it. So the alternate data, again, can also come from social media, but many countries have data privacy laws, data collection laws, and various kinds of guidelines. But there are countries, especially in the third world, that do not have many of these guidelines. So it is actually also incumbent upon whoever's collecting the data and using them to report to ensure that there is there are no biases, there are the data is being used properly, and it's not creating any harm to the population it's being collected from. But the other opportunities really are that monitoring becomes very frequent when you use these methodologies, because instead of doing surveys, expensive surveys on an annual basis, data through AI can be collected much frequently. It could be like almost on a daily basis that you could collect certain data if it is used through sensors, or if it is crowdsourced and put into various types of analytical devices. And then it can obviously inform policy in real time, and there are real-time feedback loops for any type of corrective action that needs to be made, because sometimes what would happen, what has happened is, the feedback is so delayed that either the problem has been exacerbated, or it has not been identified at all, or by the time it's identified, it's already been resolved. So these are also issues that can be mitigated, and the feedback can be in real time, and corrective action can be taken very, very quickly. And of course, it can be used for early warning, any kind of disasters, disaster warning, through again putting up sensors on windmills and things like that. You can actually detect weather patterns and inform whether there's going to be a certain type of weather pattern that will create massive, large-scale destruction. And then yeah.
Sorry to disturb, but to use the time effectively, I need to stop you here, and maybe we can carry on with the question sections. But thank you for all the information you have provided and the examples, which are quite relevant in the sense that we're having a lot of climate change risks, and your examples are very, very relevant in that respect. So I would like to carry on with our next speaker, who is Vijit Kanangara. Vijit is a tech entrepreneur based in Colombo, Sri Lanka. He provides leadership to a multicultural enterprise with business in Asia and in Middle East and now Europe. The enterprise comprises 3 groups of companies, namely Smart Media, the annual report company, which is the acknowledged leader for annual reports in the Eastern Hemisphere. Afro, a software company that has designed, built, and commercialized a suite of software products on knowledge management, and Q&E, a boutique firm providing a 360 degrees brand communication solutions. So Vijit will be talking about AI and integrated reporting. I leave the floor to you. Thank you very much, Vijit.
Thank you, Ilke. Hello, everyone, and Ayubowan. That's the way we greet in Sri Lanka. And that means may you live long. So I'm very, very pleased to be here. I have a few slides, so let me start by sharing my screen. So I want to talk about the role of AI in integrated reporting. And I think most of you are probably aware of what integrated reporting is. So the long and short of integrated reporting is really, it's all about value creation. And the whole idea is to try and promote integrated thinking in the organizations, so that in turn leads to a behavioral change in these organizations. So I would like to start by first clarifying what value creation is, and then end my presentation with leaving you with a few thoughts. It's more like food for thought on some possible roles that AI can play in promoting integrated reporting. So, what is value creation? So I want to offer a very, very simple definition of this. You have the organization, or let's say the company, and you have the stakeholders. That is not only just your shareholders, but your employees, customers, business partners, and even the society and the environment within inverted commas is considered a stakeholder. So now the organization delivers value to all these stakeholders, not just the investors. Now that is what we refer to as sustainability. Now with integrated reporting, when we talk about value creation, this is only half the story of value creation. And the other half is that the organization in turn derives value from these stakeholders. So this is like a virtuous cycle. I think Roberto was also giving us an example of how these virtuous cycles work. So the more the organization delivers value to their stakeholders, the stakeholders in turn become valuable to the organization in driving their future earnings, or let's say in driving their purpose. So therefore, in integrated reporting parlance, these stakeholders now become forms of capital. So value creation, therefore, is about sustainability on the one side, and on the other side, it's about capital formation. Now, in integrated reporting, another very important aspect of integrated reporting is that it takes a multi-capital approach. So I just told you how the stakeholders become forms of capital. And this is not an exhaustive list of stakeholders, but this list would represent stakeholders of most organizations or most businesses. So let's say you deliver value to your customers, and the customers in turn, I mean, the more you deliver value to the customers, you will increase your customer base, you will increase the customer loyalty, and so therefore that's good news for your future earnings. So in other words, you're developing your customer capital. So all these capitals, they don't stand still, they are dynamic. So either you are growing them or they are getting depleted. And in integrated reporting, the other group of capital is the institutional capital. Now, these are the things like the patents, copyrights, brands, culture, systems, and processes, and that sort of thing. And then, of course, we all know the financial capital. And financial capital usually is represented, if we want one number to represent our financial capital, we can take the net assets, or what we call the owner's equity. So reporting on value creation is really about reporting on sustainability and capital formation. So before we look at AI, let us look at the key challenge of not having adequate and generally accepted non-financial indicators for reporting on sustainability and capital formation. So let's start by the non-financial indicators that we have for reporting on sustainability. Now, in relative terms, I would say that we already have a fair number of indicators on these areas of environment, society, employees, and all your other stakeholders, but to varying degrees. And also these indicators are somewhat well understood, and also they have been used by organizations for quite some time. Nevertheless, there are areas for improvement, and I think Samra explained this very well in her remarks that she just made. And if I may summarize some of those, the issues are the issues of capturing the data, capturing better data, capturing the data in real time, and making the data capture more transparent, and making the data capture more efficient, and capturing data that can identify patterns and make predictions for the future. So now these are the areas that AI can play a role when it comes to the non-financial indicators on sustainability. Now, if you look at the non-financial indicators on capital formation, the situation is far worse, because unlike in sustainability, when it comes to capital formation, for financial capital, like I said, we have a nice, neat indicator in owner's equity, or let's say net assets. But when it comes to the stakeholder capitals or institutional capital, we really don't have a good set of generally accepted indicators to report on this. So there's a lot of work to be done before before we can bring AI into this in defining these indicators.
Vijay, just a quick reminder that we're about to finish our time for your presentation. Okay. If you want to wrap it up.
Right. How many minutes do I have?
Just a couple of, we're almost about to finish, really. If you can wrap it up.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
So let me take two forms of stakeholder capital, customer capital and employee capital. So now some of these are directly measurable, like the growth of the customer base, or the skill set or the experience of the employees. But there are other indicators that have to be measured through proxy data. So this is where AI can play a big role. So AI can be used to discretely capture the proxy data to indicate the status quo as well as make early predictions. I have only 2 more slides, okay, and I want to leave you with a few utopian ideas, and that is the ultimate in reporting on value derived, that is the capital formation side of it, would be to try and develop a consolidated non-financial indicator for each of the capitals. So like net assets, can we have a financial consolidated indicator for each of these other capitals? And if we do, taking that further, imagine having non-financial indicators for the rest of the milieu as well. So things on all these things, if we have non-financial indicators, and then imagine if we could finally develop a single non-financial indicator that aggregates this full milieu. So, so I would like to so I'm done, okay. And what I spoke to you about, we have published an ebook. If you like to download it, you can go to smartannualreport.com and download this, what we call the Smart Integrated Reporting Methodology. That has nothing to do about AI, but it's about how we help clients to operationalize the IR framework. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bridget, and thank you for putting AI in the context of integrated reporting and putting, the different capital measures in context as well. So we would like to carry on with Tan Pang Ling, who is a certified chartered accountant with more than 20 years of experience in the area of auditing, corporate financial advisory, and financial planning. She is the founder of AI Integrated Reporting Information System in Kuala Lumpur, aiming to automate and turn unstructured data into data-driven decisions and create value for companies to sustain in their businesses. Prior to this, she was the managing partner of the audit firm that she has founded. Today, Tan will be actually sharing her thoughts on AI solutions in corporate reporting. The floor is yours, Tan.
Thank you very much, AK, and thank you for my earlier panelists who have shared a very insightful on how to create value and how we link up the integrated reporting together with sustainability. You see, the corporate reporting framework is actually very well defined and all that, but what is needed is beyond that, the non-financial data, how do we capture this and use it in our organization to better create value to the whole organization, to the stakeholder of the company that we are in, So maybe I just share the screen that I have on this. Just give me a minute. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, right. Okay. So I think to sum up, there's very important to have this formal communication between companies and their stakeholders to inform them about the performance of the companies, their strategies, the impact on various shareholders that is affected, the community, the workers, the environment. And there's a very increasing pressure for real-time and accurate information and news for shareholders and stakeholders here. Because whatever presented in the financial is always outdated when we get it. And the board actually need instant real information for them to make decision on arriving at the strategy to be sustainable, to make things more profitable for the company, to the investors that have invested the money in and all that. So I think we need AI solutions that is well enough to cater for these needs. So let's go to the next slide. So when we have integrated reporting, there are some key benefits we can derive from this, which includes, when we have a more integrated reporting, we know where our risk is, and therefore we can enhance how we manage this risk in terms of our organization between the departments. How do we capture clients? How do we become more efficient and productive in our delivering the services or the products to the market? And with more information that is more structured, the organization can, promote innovative, to do more R&D and to attract more new customers to come into them, And they also, number 3 is they need a license to operate. For example, let's say if you're a manufacturing company in Malaysia, there are many licenses you need to obtain, like, the manufacturing license, your import, export licenses and all that. So these are the things that you can, manage well when we have better information, real time for ordering your stock, so that you're not over tied up your capital for the inventory purchases and all that. So on key benefits number 4, you can become more responsive to the investors, and in return you can secure better capital via other forms. For example, like investors through PE funding and all that, because traditionally we have been relying a lot on bank borrowings, and so that they are also new forms of capital where we venture into this fintech world, like what Samra has pointed out. Okay, and in fact, through digitalization of some of the manufacturing processes, you can improve your productivity and also optimize your costs, reduce the manpower reliance on that. And lastly, when all these are integrated, you can create better brand value for yourself and have a better reputation in the market. People will come to you when they know that you are, you know, ESD certified and so on. Okay. Okay. So why we created this IRIS? Because we see there's a need in the market, because we are drowned with a lot of unstructured data, a lot of noises everywhere else. And some of this news may not be true. So that's where we need to gather information in an intelligent way. All these fragmented data need from various sources can be extracted and filtered to make it into a more meaningful data for the organization to use in coming up with their reporting, and also the whole holistic about how we make this information useful to the organizations. Okay. In fact, to the investors, to the stakeholders, like a public listed company, you need to tell a good story. What is forming your strategic connections with the number of topics and the team within and outside your organization? How can we sell a good story so that people will come and invest in our shares, people will work in our organization, and how the community look at us, okay? And we also need to look at the reader's interests, and we tailor-make our reporting to address those issues. For example, they are like river pollution for one of the case in Malaysia, and that really affects this company that produces the thing. So suddenly their reputation has, been not so good because of this negative news that affect them, you see. So how do we respond to this? So with AI, you can respond in a better manner. And how do we address these issues? And how do we quickly clean up the river pollution and so on, so that people will come back to support us in terms of supporting our products in the market and so on. What is our business worth? You know, strategically, we can explain the impact by pursuing these short-term to a long-term strategies on our group performance when we have a more holistic, integrated reporting being formed. Because at the moment in Malaysia, a lot of the time, organizations are just looking at compliance issue. We have this integrated reporting. It's just to comply with what the regulatory requirements are. But holistically, if you look back at the organization, so a lot of things are being addressed on the short-term solutions rather than a long-term planning for the organization. So that's why it's important that we have this integrated reporting and relate it back to the sustainable goals that, earlier on where the other panel speaker has mentioned how important it is, okay? So this is a way where we analyze the data strategically. From the financial and non-financial data, we can strategize and come up with a long-term outcome that we want. We filter that through and we meet the needs and expectations of the market, our stakeholders, and we see where's the trade-off that we can use this data. How do we use it to blend into our reporting to be more effective? And then we form a strategic communication. How do we communicate to our stakeholders? Like, for example, investors, they would want certain information about the ROI, about how well the market respond to all these sustainable goals, how it affects the community, the workers, and so on. Okay, before people want to get your products or import things from you. And very important, having formed all these data analysis strategically, we need to have monitoring to oversight and see the controls on the organization. How do we work ourselves to get more profit and so on, and also how does our action impact the environment, so that we are sustainable in our business and not destroying the environment. And we also look at the human rights of our workers and so on. Okay, and the next one is how do we use AI in alignment with the IIRC and the UN 17 SDG framework? Because at the moment it's very manual, right? In fact, all these 17 SDGs, they are all interrelated. And that's why we need to have some form of digitalization so that we can connect these 17 goals to and map it back to the organization processes to see how we can be more productive and respond to the market needs. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the alignment process on the SDG with the value creation that we have. We have the financial aspect, the manufacturing aspect, the intellectual properties, the human capital, the natural, the social and relationship, and then this is mapped to be in line with the sustainable development, and we process it to be aligned with the mission and vision of the company. That's where you see the input, the business activities, the output, and the outcome. And at the end, that is where we map and see how it link up to the 17 SDGs, you know. And at the bottom, you can see that's where we started with the raw data, unstructured data, and telling the right stories that interest the readers that we have. And what is the business worth to the outside world and also to the inside organization of ours. So with this automation, in fact, the processes on the reporting can be streamlined to a very fast. For example, certain news affecting my industry, like the rubber glove, for example, is a very hot topic in Malaysia because the demand is more than supply. So how do this company respond to the need of the market? By having more factories to process the goods, and how do we export it to US and other part of the world, you know?
Okay, Tan, I need to interrupt you. I'm so sorry because we have lined up speakers and I don't want to really get their time. So I would give you words on the Q&A session, and thank you for insights. And I would like to thank all three of our panelists in the first part who actually emphasize the importance of data quality and integrated management in terms of achieving sustainable development goals. Now we're moving to the second part of our panel, and we're going to be discussing about AI and digital technologies for creating sustainable solutions in this part. As we all know, broader sustainable development goals are growing imperative for businesses and governments, and AI can help here as well, whether through smart agriculture, new energy sources, or more resilient infrastructure. AI is central to creating a more just and prosperous world. AI isn't just a way of businesses to win in the marketplace, it's a way for enterprises and governments to win trust from all stakeholders by meeting their long-term needs. And in that respect, we can say that businesses need to deploy responsible AI that accelerates innovation, meets long-term organization goals, and supports a better future for the earth. Whereas governments need to design policies for AI to deliver greater prosperity, social justice, and sustainability. And finally, we should say civil societies, businesses, and governments together have to harness AI to solve the planet's most pressing problems and make our cities more livable and sustainable. So in this part, we will have Kelvin Ung, Roberto Benatello, and Karen Bernstein, who will be talking about how AI and digital technologies can be used for creating sustainable solutions. We will start with Kelvin Ung, who is the managing partner and CEO of Strategic Intelligence Consulting Purpose, and he is a Durban strategy and innovation consultant and former regulator with SFG. He is an international business strategist that supports executives, boards, and senior management in transforming their businesses, branding, marketing, development, supported by technology innovation and transformation programs. Kelvin will be talking about digital innovation in capital markets, and the floor is yours, Kelvin. Can you hear us?
Please unmute.
Sorry, I'm unmuted now.
Okay.
So my background is from capital markets, and I am also a former regulator with the SFC. From a sustainability perspective, I guess my story is I kind of fell into this industry by accident. I started off looking at digitization of compliance-related information for the regulator to help them design their intelligence program. And then over the last year or two, what I was exposed to was a lot of machine learning and AI technology across the world. So I worked at the SFC level, which is the Hong Kong securities regulator, and also at the IOSCO level, which is the global group of securities regulators. And from that, I was fascinated to see what type of, I'd say it's more machine learning than artificial intelligence at this moment, technologies are available to process data. And then so began this journey in terms of exploring into, I guess, the digital world of capital markets. Now, what I find in the evolution of capital markets right now, certainly in Hong Kong, is the regulators here are looking at, say, Task Force for Climate Change. They're looking at many different global taxonomies. And one of the challenges they're facing is to work out, okay, how do we pick out from the non-financial and the financial data to create regulation that's impactful on capital markets, right? To ultimately drive ourselves towards the goals of the 17 SDGs. Or in you know, China, Xi Jinping has just announced, obviously, the carbon neutral strategy of China for 2060. Hong Kong's also come up with its 2050 carbon neutral strategy. Now, in that context, what I see is there's two kind of like pockets of technology that are developing. There are the data analytics to review and make decision-making easier for executives, which can utilize artificial intelligence and machine learning. We can go into some examples in a bit more detail in a moment. And then there is actually solutions coming to the market where they're directly solving the problem of, say, a specific SDG. So it could be some form of environmental protection or climate change impact. So both of these spaces, I've kind of like, I like playing in the visionary space. I've been working at both ends of the spectrum as such. What's really interesting is hearing from the conversations earlier, is there seems to be a general consensus that there is a lack of data available to utilize for decision making across the industry, or if the data is available, it tends to be siloed within corporations or within government infrastructure. So certainly the first step for most enablement of machine learning and artificial intelligence really is just the opening up of how to access the data. And I certainly found that whilst I was within a regulatory body myself, the biggest challenge I faced to actually digitizing what the regulator was trying to achieve was the fact that all the governance frameworks are out of date, right? So we've got these policies and governance frameworks of companies which inhibitors for utilization of data either inside the organization, and certainly when it goes to contributing to data for society, you know, there's probably most companies don't have a framework to actually be able to handle that very effectively. So that was one of the areas which I certainly worked on with the regulator to open up, and you think that's the first step really to digitization. Once we get to the next stage in terms of digitization, we're able to share this holistic data, then it becomes quite interesting looking at the macro level of what a company can do. And if you take a corporation and break it down, and you look at, there's two things that most companies will have. They'll either have a large supply chain of which there's data that's relevant to being processed using machine learning, which the executives can make decisions from, or there's basically data that's external to the company, which it would like to process for to understand better what the external perspective on the company is. Now, if I put it back in the context of capital markets, you've got asset managers right now, or portfolio managers, which are looking to make investment decisions into companies, and they're looking at these corporations and saying, well, I can't really see whether these corporations are in alignment with my most material investment goals. Almost none of them have any data other than some ESG ratings, which don't truly reflect whether a corporation is moving forward in terms of making an impact on any of the material SDGs. So a lot of these corporations, where I hear there's and maybe I have a slightly different view from some of the other panelists, is actually there are a lot of, certainly in this region, machine learning companies materializing where they're looking at different ways of pre-processing data for the purpose of investment decision making, and where regulation, and obviously having been a former regulator myself, where regulation kind of is almost like slightly after the event. A lot of the forward-thinking companies are saying, how do we get ahead of the curve? How do we process and generate insights into data where we can make investment decisions? And obviously where companies are able to achieve that ahead of other corporations, that's where the alpha opportunity is for capital investment. So that's one way that certainly artificial intelligence is already being utilized. And I can compare it to some of the work that I've done in the past, where we looked at external data sources such as disclosure reporting, news reports. All this information can be processed using machine learning to generate different types of insights. Now, depending on whether you're an investment manager or you're a regulator or some government official, you're going to want different insights from that data. And therein lies the challenge for some of these companies as well, is there's so many different ways to process the same data set. That's where it becomes, it gets a bit messy. And I think certainly the industry is still right now trying to find the appropriate use cases for each perspective in the industry. The other way, which is really interesting for the asset managers to start to look at this, is when they're making investments into their portfolio companies, it's like, you know, are the portfolio companies in alignment with their investment mandate? And then certainly as regulation increases, certainly in Hong Kong, it will be increasing in the next 12 months, with regards to, are you making investment decisions in alignment with your SDG or so ESG claims? There's a lack of evidencing and transparency into these corporations. And again, this is where machine learning or data analytics can be used to collect and gain insights and transparently represent whether these companies or corporations are heading in the right direction. The other area which is really interesting for artificial intelligence and machine learning is certainly, even if we look at governments and regulators themselves and how they use these tools for policing, monitoring, predicting impact on various SDGs. So I think, you know, there's a whole host of opportunities certainly in utilizing machine learning across these different industry sectors, and it's really just picking out the specific use cases. And certainly each country and city has a different level of maturity of digitization. So if you think about the digital trend that we've gone through for the last, I guess, last couple of years, but we're at the point where certain cities are more mature in their digital capability than others. And those certainly with the digital insights and the ability to share information from one platform to the other platform, they've probably got a greater chance of making a true impact on delivering the 17 SDGs. Having said that, Hong Kong, obviously I live in Hong Kong, I've lived here for the last 15 years. I would say it's quite an archaic city with regards to digitization when I compare it to China. One of the benefits of being so far behind in Hong Kong is maybe there's a leapfrog opportunity. So that's certainly what I'm hoping to see in this region. And certainly as the regulatory frameworks for green finance are being put together, and bank regulators are looking at, okay, how do, you know, when we do a bond issuance, how are we able to evidence that the monies are being spent in alignment with the ESG commitments or claims? You can see again, as we're collecting, processing data, these are where I see the most powerful immediate benefits of using machine learning, certainly to classify large pools of data and then help evidence whether or not we're, I guess, in alignment with our commitments. So that's kind of like the Hong Kong story from a capital markets point of view. One of the biggest pushes right now, which we see across the whole region, is really this push towards being carbon neutral. And certainly there are huge opportunities where machine learning can be a really powerful technology in delivering just this one outcome. With respect to carbon neutrality, you know, if you think about the most the highest impacting carbon emissions, certainly for most cities, is going to be urban or commercial vehicles. And certainly this is where machine learning, one of its strengths is pattern detection and optimization. This has probably got the strongest use case application for this technology for delivering a carbon neutral city in, well, when we say by 2050, so, or 2060 in China. But I think that's certainly where we have the most powerful story to go. In that respect, so I'm not sure how many minutes we have left.
Well, we have 1 more minute.
Okay. Let's see. So I think the main visionary story really for delivering all of these machine learning technologies is really just, if most corporations can go back and look at their corporate governance, executive compensation being tied to ESG outcomes, and then obviously these tools and technologies that come from generated insights from machine learning, we're taking effectively back office processes and back office data and putting it at the forefront of executives to then make strategic decisions. And that's where it's really exciting in the space that we're in right now. So I think that's probably the final thought that I would leave everyone with, is just the as opposed to it being a CSR process or a back office function where we're trying to meet certain ISO standards or sustainability frameworks, it's more like, how can boards and governments be brought to the foresight of executives, and then utilization of these technologies for them to drive insights and make decision making. That's where I think we can make the greatest impact if we're to achieve the 2030 UN 17 SDGs.
Thank you, Calvin. That was very, very good, insightful information for us with your background in capital markets. And considering the growth in ESG funds in general, in the asset management side, this is quite an important topic to tackle. So thank you for your valuable comments. So we're moving on to our next speaker, who is Roberto Benatello. Roberto is the Executive Director of Business Council for Sustainable Development Malaysia, a global network partner of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Prior to this, Roberto was the CEO of EU Malaysia Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Roberto held several senior general manager positions in private sector, working for Fortune 500 companies and startups in various countries. Roberto holds an MBA from Bocconi University in Italy and MA in marketing from Lincoln University. And today he will be talking about how AI and digitalization can enhance sustainable development goals. The floor is yours, Roberto.
Thank you. Thank you very much, CE.A.I, and thank you for the previous panelists. So, as you rightly said, I'm going to talk about the link. I'm trying to create a link between digitalization and artificial intelligence and the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm going to give some real examples because I think it's important to move from the theory to the practice and see where opportunities can be. Allow me to share my screen so that I can project a couple of slides. Are you able to see my slides? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start by saying that I am part of, BCSD Malaysia is part of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the leading business sustainability organization in the world. 10 years ago, WBCSD started this project called Vision 2050, and it's basically they lay down a path for business to let's say the goal is for 9 billion people, actually over 9 billion people, to live well within the boundaries of the planet by 2050. And they identified a number of priorities and a number of sectors and areas that need to be transformed in order to get there. But what is clear is that the task this task will demand a bigger and more ambitious transformation thinking that we've ever manifested before. And it's the magnitude of the task that it's quite scary. Transforming systems, because this is what we're talking about globally at the scale and speed which is required to realize the sustainable development goals, calls for unprecedented level of action. This is why the title of my slide is a scale of collective effort rarely seen outside wartime. And it is a quote, I don't remember from where, but I can show you this is a real quote, and I totally support, because the endeavor is massive. So the key transformations area, if you look at them singularly, this is the list, and basically we've got the advancement in human capacity through improvement in education and healthcare, responsible consumption and production, the decarbonization of the energy sector, the access to nutritional food and clean water for all, building smart cities, and digitalization and artificial intelligence. So this is to show that digitalization and artificial intelligence is an area of key transformation and also an enabler to this Vision 2050 that I mentioned before. There is one, it's important to say that digitalization is not a blessing in itself. It's like a double-edged sword. Digitalization can exacerbate social divides and compound environmental risks and destabilize societies on one side. But on the other side, of course, it's got a positive potential, which is the potential to enable green economy and transnational networking, with great scope for connecting people around the world and boosting a culture of global cooperation. A culture of global cooperation and connecting people, which is really key to creating sustainable solutions. There is a paper that I stumbled across recently, and I found this term quite interesting, digitainability, which is the mix between digitalization and sustainability. And if we look at digitalization and AI, as I said before, it creates a social change, and as such, they have to be sustainable, fair, and relevant to all people working for the common good. Digital change will have impact. Some of them are helpful and some others are detrimental over every single SDG. And it's important to mention that these impacts can be positive and negative. Obviously, we need to work in order to stay on the positive side. So the integration between these two mega trends of digitalization and sustainability could shape the 21st century in a positive way. And we have to create the conditions, because this integration between sustainability and digitalization and AI is positive and works towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. So what is next? It's important to empower companies, in my point of view, to reap the benefits of the digital transition by spearheading innovation in the sustainability and green sector. So it's really important to use this opportunity given by digitalization and AI to trigger innovation, which is conducive to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And in my point of view, this can also be an opportunity for developing economies. Sorry if I'm running a little bit, but I've got a lot to say and I'm conscious of time. So if we look at the type of technologies that we are talking about in this realm of digitalization and AI, we have additive manufacturing, AI, automation, big data analytics, blockchain, IoT, and cyber physical systems, novel business models, on-demand production, real-time monitoring, sensors and data collecting, virtual reality, and augmented reality. These are the kind of technologies that are at our disposal and we can use positively to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. What I have tried to do, and again, this is just an example, and by no means this wants to be an exhaustive list, but I think it's helpful because it gives a flavor of what can happen and how these technologies, the technologies that I just mentioned in the previous slide, can help the Sustainable Development Goals. So let's take them one by one, and I give you some examples. For example, number one, no poverty. We can have digital solutions to create apps to educate people and increase their income level and finance literacy. Finance literacy is extremely important, especially in developing economies. So there's a lot that can be done in that space. Artificial intelligence and digital solutions can also help. Number two, zero hunger. In terms, for example, to improve the yields through precision agriculture. Again, there is a massive amount of data that can be analyzed and provide solutions to increase the yields in agriculture. And again, with the population of the world reaching 9.7 billion people by 2050, I can tell you that it's really important that we do not take more land from forests, but we improve the yields of the current agriculture cultivations. For number three, for example, good health and well-being. Artificial intelligence can be used in medical diagnostics, especially when it comes to medical imaging, because AI can help spotting several diseases and make advanced diagnostics. So that is an area of application. Quality of education. Again, solutions can be created for providing autonomous tutoring systems, offering personalized learning options. In terms of gender equality, number five, AI can really help in reducing decision-maker bias in recruiting or finance through AI-powered selection software. In terms of clean water and sanitation, pursuing smart water policy and solutions, again, by looking at patterns of consumption of water, utilization of water, for example, it's really possible to come up with solutions that can make the use of water much smarter in cities, but also outside cities. When it comes to affordable and clean energy, this is a very, very important area of transformation because we are moving towards a system whereby there's not going to be one grid, one national grid, but there's going to be a different solution, perhaps a smaller grid, a number of other microgrids, consumers of energy that will transition from being only consumers to prosumers, or producers and consumers. So here, for example, artificial intelligence can be used to enable peer-to-peer energy trading solutions. Let's move, because I think I do have a few seconds left.
Yes, thank you.
On number 11, for example, sustainable cities and communities, solutions that help optimize energy use in cities, urban transportation systems via mobility as a service solution. So I guess the message that I want to leave with you is this. It's very, very important to look at this type of solutions, this type of ideas that can use digitalization and artificial intelligence to enable the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is very important because from these ideas, you will be able to create companies, business, and from this business, you will be able to create jobs. And it's extremely important now to shift jobs from traditional industries that are in decline to new industry and to fuel the new Green Deal. And that's the end of my presentation.
Roberto, thank you very much. These examples, I'm sure, will give insights to a lot of people in terms of, creating new job lines and creating new innovation ideas. Thank you for that. So we carry on with our last speaker, Karen Bernstein, who is a social entrepreneur and a consultant. She serves as Chief Strategy Officer for SurgeryBox, a medical technology startup that was conceived at Harvard and later developed further for MIT. SurgeryBox aims to save lives in conflict and humanitarian settings and low and middle income countries through the provision of safe surgery. She is also consultant to Google on its SDG accelerator and technology innovation hubs with a focus on the SDGs. Most recently, she was a mentor for the Microsoft AI for Good program. She has 15 years of experience working for UN, the British government, and non-profits in conflict and development contexts in Africa, Asia, and Middle East. Karen will be talking about AI solutions in the startup ecosystem to advance SDG innovation. Floor is yours, Karen.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. So what I wanted to touch upon today is actually a little bit different than the rest of the speakers, which is what distinguishes SDG related impact from other types of social impact. And this is something that has come up time and again in my work. And essentially all of this has a large impact on reporting and impact analysis. So you probably know the SDGs, but did you know that an integral to them are the leave no one behind principles? And this is what the UN calls the central transformative promise of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs. And these principles are focused on eradicating poverty, ending discrimination and exclusion, and reducing the inequalities and vulnerabilities that leave some people behind. And they make particular mention of the vulnerabilities faced by women. And essentially what this means for business solutions geared towards the SDGs is that they must be focused on inclusive development, or ensuring access of all strands of society to the same development opportunities. So if you've read the SDG Compass, which is the guiding document for businesses on taking action related to the SDGs, you'll note that it recommends impact reporting related to disadvantaged, marginalized, and vulnerable groups. And it specifically outlines how this can be done by the use of indicators that allow for disaggregation by socioeconomic criteria. So, and this is really important because what it can tell you a lot about how the business is impacting different groups of society, like women, like the elderly, or poorer rural communities. And it gives you a much wider understanding of the impact of the business, and hence the real impact it's making on inclusive development. And I have seen businesses, startups that have used this sort of analysis to learn that for instance, their agro-tech platforms did not actually benefit poor rural farmers, or that blockchain technology negatively affected women refugees. And it's also important to do this sort of socioeconomic analysis to understand the impact of the business on the full value chain, everyone from suppliers to customers and employees. Now, the leave no one behind principles also push us to take a more holistic perspective. And for instance, not just to understand the impact of the business on women, but the most vulnerable group of women in society. And lastly, I just want to add that it's important to take a cross-sectoral vision of when evaluating impact. So not just to focus on a new approach for health service delivery or digital finance, but to truly understand how the model is contributing towards climate change mitigation, how it's contributing towards biodiversity preservation, poverty reduction, better nutritional outcomes, reduced inequalities, etc. And so lastly, but very importantly, I want to talk about the gender-related challenges of AI systems. And UN Women wrote this report that you'll see in the slide here that provides a gender lens with regards to the use of AI and big data in the development and delivery of digital financial solutions. And what their research found was that because AI and machine learning are based on algorithms and systems that are designed by people at various stages, they can be flawed and they have unintended consequences. And so, for instance, the report outlined what happens when AI systems aim to identify customers' creditworthiness. If the company's past parameters to define creditworthiness were not fair and transparent, the model will incorporate this criteria. And essentially, it results in bias. And so you can probably see where I'm going with this, that this bias is the bias resulted in discriminating against women in some instances. Also, gender bias was found, they found in the data itself, because women are often underrepresented in many ways throughout parts of the world. There's often less data available for them, and the data that exists is often of lower quality. So as a result, machine learning models incorporate the biases in the training data. And this is really important when you consider deep learning systems, which apply pattern recognition. So according to the report, when the data used is flawed by systemic historical biases, those biases will be replicated at scale and will be hard to eliminate. And so finally, I want to mention that gender biases can also be found in preparing the data, which involves selecting which attributes you want the algorithm to consider. And again, these decisions are made by humans who are choosing which attributes to consider or to ignore. And this has a significant impact on the model's predictive accuracy. So in order to mitigate these risks, it's important for companies to audit their algorithms. And these audits would identify programs that have trained themselves to optimize the services for a specific group only due to biased data sets. And so the UN Women's Report noted that without these audits, new services and products could not only be failing women, but they'd also fail to capture the complexity of gender and to offer fair services to other underserved populations. And so just to conclude what I hope I left you with in this presentation is that the integral part of the leave no one behind principles to the SDGs and ways in which businesses can integrate their essence, both in the reporting and the impact analysis. And that's mine. Thank you very much.
Karen, thank you so much. I think, you know, one sentence that we can all take from your presentation, which really sums up all of the highlights of the discussions today, is leave no one behind. I think that's really, really important. Thank you for highlighting that. And thank you for bringing in the gender lens into AI perspective as well. Because through the times that we are going with the pandemic, unfortunately, inequalities are getting more visible, and we need to really use AI to really close those gaps. So we have less time than we anticipated for Q&A. So I would like to really dive into the questions. You have very different backgrounds coming from different geographies, which gives a very diversified, discussion platform for us. So I would like to thank you all and start, raising my question to Samra and Roberto to start with. And I would like to understand, how we can use AI to gain future insights on SDGs and why it is important to find opportunities to integrate AI and other digital technologies with SDGs. Can you elaborate on that? And please kindly note that, we have less than 15 minutes now. If you can elaborate on a couple of minutes, we can carry on with the next questions. Thank you.
I will be very, very brief. So just to go straight to the point, we must find ways to get the business on board. We must find ways that the business is incentivized to move to sustainable practices and sustainable solutions, but at the same time, they need to see what's beneficial for them. So in my point of view, digitalization and artificial intelligence offer technologies and offer solutions and offer opportunities to business, to come up with new business model, new business ideas, new products that can be used to create business, to make money, to create jobs, but at the same time pursue the sustainable development goals. It's really important when we talk to business to bear in mind that we need to find solutions that are win-win solutions. And in my point of view, digitalization and artificial intelligence offer a lot of opportunities to create ideas, businesses that are conducive to improve and facilitate the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. That's in a nutshell my answer.
Thank you. Samra, would you like to comment on that?
I think Roberto did a very good job and pretty much summing everything up. I don't think in the interest of time, I would add anything more.
Okay, thank you so much. Then I will move to Calvin. and ask, how could investors and regulators utilize AI to tackle and deliver material impact on meeting commitments to SDG objectives?
I'll keep it short in the interest of time. So in terms of the asset managers and investors, really probably the simplest use case is just for deal screening, for investment and monitoring, potentially divestment, and then also with regards to just risk management and compliance, so that they can obviously evidence and classify that their investments are in alignment with their SDG commitments. That's probably the most material impact. And then for the regulators, it's really about monitoring supervision, which is their primary purpose, and how they can detect effectively these types of risks within their market participants.
That's great. Thank you so much. Then maybe with Karen, we can carry on and get your insights on, how actually startups are using AI to advance SDG innovation, because we have a lot of background on that.
Yeah, sure. So I have a few examples. So through the Google SDG Accelerator, which focuses on digital platforms, they use AI and machine learning. I've seen a range of different innovations, and they often address more than one of the SDGs. So one startup called Impact is tackling climate change and sustainable cities by combining remote sensing, like satellite Earth observations, and ground sensing, like land use and buildings and roads, to build greenhouse gases historical data. And then they're able to forecast at a city level. In the digital health domain, a Kenyan-based startup called Flare, which actually were just nominated as one of Time Magazine's top 100 innovations of 2020. So Flare was designed specifically for places without 911, and its AI platform utilizes mapping and telecommunications technology to connect patients to available ambulances and first responders within minutes. But I also want to mention that AI is being used with non-digital innovations as well. So as my introduction stated, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for a medical technology startup called Surgibox, which is an ultra-portable battery-powered operating room that fits in a backpack that doctors strap on to get to patients immediately. And while Surgibox is a medical device, there are specific ways in which data analytics is being incorporated. So it can record patient parameters for the duration of the application and throughout surgery. It has an automated airflow system with the capability to extend to additional sensing and patient monitoring. And importantly, it can also, the AI allows it to perform patient monitoring, particularly blood loss. So imagine that in most parts of the world, blood loss is estimated by looking at indicators like the number of sponges that are soaked and how the floor is soaked. Obviously, this is really problematic because catastrophic bleeding happens before and after surgery. So if you can provide that precise continuous capture of blood loss, you can actually leverage analytical insights to predict resuscitation requirements. So AI is being used in all kinds of amazing ways to deal with the SDGs.
That's a great example. Thank you very much. And I think, again, through the times that we're going through, companies had to be very, very innovative. And I think startups had to come up with a lot of different innovative ideas in the pandemic time, especially when we had a lot of restrictions on supply chain, health restrictions and all that, stuff. I think created a innovative platform, urge SMEs to really act differently. But let's move on to the corporate segment and see, whether they have they could really act that quickly as well. I would like to ask Calvin, actually, in terms of, the corporates, what is actually holding corporates back from making a greater impact using AI for sustainability, both for public and private sector? Can you elaborate on that? And we can take it as the last question,
Sure.
considering the time.
So, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, from the corporate's point of view, a lot of it's going to be governance policies and data usage. This is part of the whole digitization of those entities. I can give you two examples of companies that like startup companies that I work with, which I bring to Asia. So one is a data analytics company called Worldwide Generation, where we focus on helping them map, or helping corporates map their supply chain and collect data across their supply chain in the context of SDGs. It gives the executives then the ability to make decisions about their most material SDGs and whether they are making a true impact, and be able to set custom KPIs and metrics. This is all in the context of the world's leading global taxonomies, where we've kind of mapped it all together in one business model. In another example, in terms of corporates moving forward, we're about to, I guess, another kind of tech company that I'm bringing to this region. It's all focused about decarbonization and the combination of really how do we bring the data portion of these, so it could be a supply chain logistics company, and how do we get effectively trucks off the road? How do we maximize their inventory refill rates in terms of the destinations of where we're sending the inventory? And then how do we then, I guess the implicit effect of being more efficient is two outcomes. Is one, we've decarbonized part of their business by removing trucks from the road. And two, we've increased their revenue streams by optimizing where we're restocking inventory across their business. This is material, obviously, when you have thousands and thousands of vending types of sites across this region. It's actually quite exciting as we kind of go into China and see, obviously, a much larger landscape. So those are two areas where you can see, what corporates could do is really just about opening up their data set and working on their data governance. And then from a community point of view, how can they look to then share this information, maybe obfuscated in some way for the greater good, which I think we're at the very early stages of doing that.
Thank you all for this valuable, panel. It was a pleasure to have you on board, and we are closing our panel, thanking you all and thanking all, contributing. So we would like to pause for a minute to take a photo, group photo.